our intention, with a little reflection. And so I was told that this past weekend, I took the weekend off, and Rabbi Daniel told everyone that I had a special guest named Judah Maccabee with me today. And while I wish that were the case, and when I quickly learned that 5 minutes ago, I thought maybe someone would be dressed up as Judah Maccabee, but no, I just want to talk about Hanukkah and one, teach a little bit about Hanukkah and our traditions and some of the history around it, but also field some questions. So either on the YouTube link or on Facebook, look at my Facebook if you are, and you can drop a question in there, and Brian, who's behind the scenes, will shoot it to me, and I'll try to get to those as well during my conversation this morning. But Hanukkah begins, of course, on the 25th day of the month of Kislev, and that is Thursday evening after sundown. And so we'll be celebrating Hanukkah this year, of course, uniquely different than any other time, I'm sure, in all of our lives. And I think it's important for us to think about how we can make that meaningful, what we can do to recognize the holiday. I love Hanukkah. I love the idea that we bring light into our world. Here we are approaching the shortest days, literally, of our world. I'm amazed at 7:30, it's still dark outside. I'm amazed at 4:30 that the sun is beginning to set. And we have an opportunity, our tradition, embrace this time of year to bring light into our world with our Chanukiot, right? But that's just a symbol of what we're supposed to be doing. But where does it come from? Of course, the story is heroic, and the story is about our people who stood for their identity, who wouldn't give up and held on to that and persevered, and why we're here today. And of course, we know the story of the Maccabees, of Mattatyahu, the leader of the Maccabee family, and then his son Judah Maccabee, who took their people outside of Jerusalem to Modi'in, to the hill country, and fought this guerrilla warfare against the Assyrian Greeks, the Seleucid dynasty empire, and were able to be victorious in a 3-year battles that were going on until 165 BCE. The temple had been desecrated, the great temple in Jerusalem, and we were able to reestablish that. And of course, the story when they get back into the temple in 165 BCE and they want to rededicate it, hence the word Hanukkah, dedication, they can't because the oil isn't there, and the oil that would always be burning in the lamp of the temple. And so they send their messengers out to go collect oil, the consecrated oil. It's a 4-day journey to get the oil, 4-day journey back. Hence the miracle of this one cruse of oil that they did find, which may have been enough oil for 1 day, lasts for 8 days. And so we have the story, the miracle. Of course, the oil is part of it, but even more so the fact of our survival as a people. Ironically, there's a lot of challenges in that story. Again, I love it. I love what we teach about it and what it shares with us for who we are. But let us be honest, the Maccabees probably wouldn't like us today. They were anti-assimilationist. They were the zealots. They were the ones who wouldn't go along with what the Greeks were asking of us. Now, initially, the Seleucid Empire, it started after Alexander the Great. He died in 323 BCE. Think. And when he died, one of his leaders was Seleucus. And Seleucus was one of the generals of the Macedonian forces and was put in charge. But there was divisions, and so his empire, in a sense, got split up, and there was infighting and stuff. So the Seleucid Empire is really what would be the Persian Empire, that area of the world, for the most part, a little bigger, and Israel, of course, is within there. And in the beginning, in the 3rd century BCE, the 2nd century BCE, in the beginning, things were okay. I mean, you followed Greek law and went along with how the Greeks were doing things and paid your taxes, but you could still be unique to your religion, your faith, and still be Jewish. But later on in time, eventually with Antiochus III, who began to be more strict in some of his laws and what the Jews needed to observe and not observe. And then really with Antiochus Epiphanes, Antiochus IV, things became much more severe, where circumcision is outlawed, where studying Torah is outlawed, where they bring in animals to the temple, not the Jews, the Assyrian Greeks, to desecrate it in a sense. And that's when the Maccabees leave Jerusalem and say, enough. We're going to go do our own thing. We're going to practice Judaism the way it is supposed to be practiced. Of course, a lot of the Jews said, we'll go along with this. We sort of have fit in and we like how things are, and we don't want to ruffle anyone's feathers. And in a sense, they're giving up their Judaism to some degree. You know, the first person killed in the story of Hanukkah is a Jew by a Jew, by the leader of the Maccabees family, when he's asked by the Syrian Greeks to to bow down to a Greek god, to bow down to an idol. And when he does, Yahoo kills him, put a sword through him. Not really something we want to elevate, right? We know the story of Hanukkah from the first and second book of Maccabees, right? Which are really historical and a story of these battles and this warfare and what's happening there too. But what's fascinating is there's no mention of the miracle of oil in the book of Maccabees. In the story of the book of Maccabees, at the end, it says when they get back to the temple, they bring in their lulavs and their etrogs, the symbols of Sukkot. Because think of the time of year it is, Sukkot would have been the last holiday the Maccabees would have missed, the Jewish people would have missed in their warfare, in their battles, and not being at the temple. So that's what the first thing they want to do. And of course, at that time, how long would Sukkot be? Outside the temple, it could be 8 days. So therefore, we get this 8-day celebration. So why do we have a miracle of oil? Why that part of the story? Well, we have to jump ahead 400 years, 500 years, 600 years to really when all of Rome, the Roman Empire, becomes Christian, right? When the Emperor of Rome converts to Christianity and then converts everyone within the Roman Empire and says, this is the entire Roman Empire is Christian. We're all part of this faith now. But of course, the people in the Roman Empire love celebrating a pagan winter solstice festival. Well, if you're living in a Christian world, a pagan solstice festival isn't going to really work. So Christmas is found to be a replacement for that. The birth of Jesus, we say, will be December 25th, and that will be something that this Roman Empire will celebrate. Instead of being a winter solstice festival, we're celebrating the birth of Jesus. Of course, the Jewish people have nothing right now as far as a holiday goes. And so we look to our tradition, and the rabbis find the story of Hanukkah and elevate that as our winter solstice festival, as our way to bring light into the world, to remind ourselves of these values that are so important to us. It wasn't a holiday yet that we celebrated because the rabbis of the Talmud, the rabbis of ancient tradition did not like the Maccabees. One, because they were such zealots, right? And they were so extreme in their behavior. Two, we forget the part of the story of how they actually won the war and got the Assyrian Greeks to finally leave the land of Israel. We won, our ancestors won, because they invited this emerging empire called the Roman Empire, the Roman forces, into Israel to help battle the Assyrian Greeks. So they brought the Romans in. The Romans, of course, become the great empire. And by the end of the Jewish war with Rome, by 135 CE, 1 out of every 2 Jews has been killed by the Romans. The Romans become paradigmatic evil for the rabbis. So the rabbis want nothing to do with the Romans, no mention of that, and don't want this story in our tradition because the Maccabees are the ones who invite the Romans in. Of course, you know, we look at the victors write history. And so the rabbis making decisions at this time leave the book of Maccabees out of the Bible. As they codify the Bible, they decide Maccabees is not going to be in there. So it's not one of our holidays. But now we find that we need it in the 4th century, 5th century CE and bring it into our story. But of course, the book of Maccabees is a war story, a story of zealousness. God is not mentioned in the story. And that's where we learn the miracle of the oil, not in the history part of it, but in the Talmud, in the faith part of it. Not saying it didn't happen, but we find it here later on. The story of the oil, of course, being that the oil, like I said, lasted for 8 days. So that's a fascinating, flip on it as we look at it and understand why that is and how that is for us. Still, it is an important holiday. But it's one, only 6 holidays are mentioned in the Torah, right? Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Well, it's not called Rosh Hashanah, it's called Yom Teruah, Shabbat, and then our 3 pilgrimage festivals, Passover, Sukkot, and Shavuot. Those are the 6 holidays of the Torah. Others that are in Bible, like Purim, the scroll of Esther, but this one gets no mention. So it's really, in modern times, it's gained so much more attention because of the Christianization of our world. And sometimes I think Jews feeling a little bit less than. So it's not an important holiday, though it still has a beautiful, important, and great message for us as Jews today. And that's what we need to do, to celebrate in that way, to find ways to bring joy into our world in the midst of darkness, both literally and figuratively. And so that's the rituals of the holiday. By putting a Hanukkah menorah, a Chanukiah, menorah means lamp, right? A Chanukiah is a specific lamp for Hanukkah, a Hanukkah menorah. Put that in your windowsill as a tradition. Why do we put it in our windowsill? Because we're not afraid to be Jewish today, that we're proud to be Jewish, that we can show the world outside of our home that we're celebrating Judaism. That's a blessing. We should never take that for granted. And with rising anti-Semitism in our world, in our country, well, we need to do that even more so to recognize that we are who we are and that we stand together in that too. In Israel, I love the tradition because buildings are made of stone, of that limestone. People have hewed outside their doors, little cutaways, so they put their Hanukkah menorahs inside that, outside their door, and walking through neighborhoods in Jerusalem and different places of Israel, in like Nachalat Shiva in Jerusalem, you see the oil lamps, the menorahs, the light of them bouncing off the limestone walls in these, tight alleys. It's such a cool thing to experience, to walk through there. And our trips to Israel in the summer, I think we did that in 2014, we were able to do that, or 16 it was. We were there during Hanukkah. It was really special to see how people celebrate in that way. Of course, another holiday celebration is eating things that are fried in oil. So whether it's potato latkes for those of us who come from Eastern Europe and Ashkenazic tradition, or those from the Sephardic world like to eat sufganiyot, like to eat jelly donuts. So in Israel, you see jelly donuts being sold in the street corners, nice, gooey, dewy, oily jelly donuts. And of course, one of the challenges is the way of celebrating as a family together. And just like how we had to sort of adapt and change things with Thanksgiving, so too we will with Hanukkah. We shouldn't be gathering in large groups. We have to be very careful right now and aware of what's going on in our world. And so whether it's through FaceTime or Zoom, lighting our Chanukiot with family members is still an important thing to do. Gift giving is something we see during Hanukkah, but it developed as a way to celebrate what happened in the story, because the gift that you would give traditionally was gelt, was money. And so the exchange of money was enacted as a way to recognize what the Maccabees did. Because when the Maccabees reestablish the ruling of the people of Israel, what's one of the first things you have to do? You mint coins, right? Roman coins are going to have, or Syrian, Greek coins are going to have images of faces of Roman emperors on them. That wouldn't be good for us. That's idolatry, engraven images. So the Maccabees mint their own currency. And so that's why giving gelt, giving money, became a tradition. That was the only gifts. Yes, in this past century, how much the more so in these past 50 years has that been elevated so much because of Christmas, and how that's so focused on commercially in our country today. So one thing I always encourage people to do is giving gifts is fine. And we know that's something special that we can look forward to, but keep that in check as well. But I think it's also important to remind ourselves of how we bring light to our world, to give a theme to every night of Hanukkah. And so one way to do that as a family or as individuals, decide what each night will be themed. So maybe one night is our local community and how we want to give to Detroit and do something special for Detroit. Maybe another is our world community, and think of those in need around the globe and what's a community we want to help, and pick a charity we want to give to. Maybe it's a world Jewish community, like learn about the Jews of Ethiopia, that 3,000, I think it was, who just got to Israel last week. Some of the last Ethiopian Jews who finally were able to make it to Israel, and how cool that is. Maybe pick as a tzedakah the Bulgarian Jewish community that's reestablishing itself, learning about itself, having not really had roots for a few generations now. Maybe it's a school we go to and we want to support that school and the importance of education. Maybe it's our temple family and doing something here at temple and honoring that. Maybe our natural world, our environment, and supporting something, an organization that is important. I mean, there's so many good tzedakah that we can help and give to. And again, that theme, bring light into our world. And I think that's really the message we want our families to understand and to appreciate. So if you have questions, throw them my way quickly. But let me just tell you a couple ways we can celebrate Hanukkah through Temple Shir Shalom. On Friday night, Thursday night begins Hanukkah, and every night on Facebook and on YouTube, you'll see us lighting the Hanukkah menorah together with different groups of people in our congregation. I think Brian confirmed this for me at 7:30 p.m. every night. We will be lighting the Hanukkah menorah. And so we've invited different members of our temple community, of our wider community, to be a part of that with me and Rabbi and Cantor. Number two, on Friday night is our family service, our annual family tradition that will be enjoying a Hanukkah service with the youth choir and Cantor leading us, doing some very special things that help us bring joy to this time. On Sunday, we have our first ever Hanukkah road rally, and that's for all ages, all families, all people to do together, competing against one another. You start from your home when you get the clues at 3:30 in the afternoon, and we end at 5:30 at Temple, and seeing how many of those clues you can pick up with photos on your phone along the way, and enjoying that together, and then concluding at 5:30 with a lighting of the Hanukkah menorah. I almost forgot. Wednesday night, the night before Hanukkah, we're getting ready for Hanukkah with our monthly trivia night as well at 8 p.m. And then I think we'll just keep lighting that menorah every night, right? Bringing more light into our world. Look, find unique ways. Tell me what you're doing to make it special. I remember one year, I think it was Trader Joe's had like a box of 8 different kinds of chocolate that came from different places of the world. And so our family, we opened up one bar of chocolate and shared it. You know, there was the Mexican chocolate with chili peppers, and there's, I don't know, it was fun. Be unique. You know, do things that are important to you, that celebrate it with one another through technology. Use that to your advantage, but remind yourself that we can have the perspective, even in dark days, to bring light into our world. That's who we are. It's who we always have been as a people, and that's what will keep us going forever. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate your time this morning. Wish you all a good and safe week, and look forward to seeing you at one of the fun things that we're doing in this upcoming week at Temple. Take care.